Welcome to I Have Something to Say, where unfiltered opinions meet raw authenticity. If you're tired of the same old canned answers and crave genuine conversations about real issues, then you've landed in the right spot. So buckle up for a roller coaster of diverse perspectives. Yours truly, Samí Haiman-Marrero, and my co-host, Chris Majocha, will dive headfirst into topics that impact our daily lives. From the boardrooms to the streets, get ready to hear real people cut through the BS and deliver the discussions you've been waiting for. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of I Have Something to Say. And Chris and I are very excited because we're going to talk about people and human beings and adding them to your team. And when you're scaling, what to do with them. 1099s, white collar gig economy, interviewing processes, all of these things that you kind of need to know to protect your business, because you're fine until you're not. And that's not my line. That's the line of my dear friend, Mandi Waters, who is an account manager with Merritt Business Solutions. And welcome, Mandi. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Sammy and Chris, for having me.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so we wanted to invite you because we're always collaborating with other either business owners or bringing on board freelancers. And then those freelancers become our regular freelancers. And so then when do they, it just gets a little bit, not sketchy, just complicated, right? And because you really don't know how to manage these people that are kind of part of your team but not really part of your, so it's kind of convoluted and a little bit ambiguous. And so I thought that you'd be the perfect person to come and talk to us about human resources and compliance and the do's and don'ts and some foundational HR concepts or practices that we should be putting into place as we're starting our businesses.
Yep.
And going from solopreneur, which is many people, that's how we start, right? And you've been through that too, right?
Been there, done that.
Into having a team. And so thank you. I want to thank you for coming and joining us to have this conversation. And just start us off by telling us, how long have you been doing this kind of work, and how did you get into this kind of work? Because you didn't start doing
not at all. Matter of fact, for years I didn't like people, so it kind of worked out. I was a production electrician for 16 years, so I did lights for tours and concerts, weddings, any type of event. I was more of the electrician behind it to make sure the lights didn't go out. And then when LED lights came in to play, I started getting in and becoming a board level technician for them. So I was very good on the technical aspect. About when I was about 30, I decided that I wanted to stop working for stupid people. So I started my own business, just like every other business owner, right?
Good reason to start your own business.
Exactly. You need more requirements to run a successful one. And because of things that I just didn't know or understand, I got hit with a $35,000 compliance fine. And it made me close my business. So now I've only been doing HR for the last couple of years. But I'm able to bring a message out of the mess. So I help business owners be able to strive and really work on and concentrate their business while taking a lot of that liability of there's a reason why it's called labor burden. It is extremely burdenous to have a labor force, but it's extremely essential to be able to survive and strive as a business owner.
Yes, it is. And so to me, it's just so interesting, right? That you have all of those different perspectives because you worked in a work environment with an employer, then you went the entrepreneurship route and had to deal with managing people, and I'm sure subcontracting and all of that, which can get a little bit, again, dicey, and it's scary because you're like, oh my gosh, now I have to, how do you say, pay people, which is a thing that, can be a little bit taxing and daunting at the beginning. But then also when they become regulars, it's really hard to discern which route to take. And so then coming into human resources with those perspectives, what kind of value do you think that brought to you coming into this new sector, right? And spending the last 2 years, because I'm sure a lot of the concepts were new to you, like you're like, oh, that's what that is, right? But you
Yeah.
were just experiencing it from the other side, and it was no bueno. No bueno at all, right?
Well, I started in the industry with someone saying, "Hey, kid, you want to make some extra cash?" And I can't tell you how many jobs I haven't signed anything or given any information, just gotten cash under the table. I've done the 1099 contractor where my full time job was looking for work. I, as a business owner, however, um, we have a tendency to think that we can do it all ourselves. And we keep putting more and more hats on our head. So we got the marketing, we can figure out, how to get clients, we can figure out how to retain clients, we can figure out customer service. But then there's all these other things that if you don't know that you should be asking about, then you just don't know that should be on your list of things to do. So I make the claim that I'm better than Google because no one pays more to get on the top of my list. And I'm willing to ask the questions that you don't even know that you should be asking.
There you go. So what are some of those questions that a lot of business owners don't know to ask? Like, what are some of the most common ones that you run across?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's mostly just about looking at their time. It's and how to protect their business. I had a friend of mine that recently purchased the business. I was like, "Congratulations, you have a new baby. You have to feed it, you have to coddle it, you have to burp it, you have to change it, you have to, look at and try to anticipate all the things that might come up so that you're prepared for it." But one of the things that business owners just don't have a whole lot of time, a lot of is time. So I'm not an HR expert by any means. The only thing that makes me different is that I now it's my job to make the time to learn about the new compliance laws that are changing, to put together presentations so that, more and more people are aware of what's actually going on. In 2024, we're not even in April, and there have been 4 compliance changes already this year. So if you don't have, access to employment lawyers that are willing to tell you about it, and you don't have the time to research it, then you just don't know. And unfortunately, the Department of Labor doesn't care that you don't know. The EEOC doesn't care that you don't know. The IRS doesn't care that you don't know. If you get caught, it's still going to cost.
Yeah. And so what are some of these questions that we should be asking as we start our businesses or start incorporating people and transitioning from solopreneur to a team?
Well, it's looking at who your workforce is going to be. So you had mentioned W-2 employees, 1099 contractors, white collar gig employees. I did put together some pros and cons of each. And then there's also the IRS has a 20-point system or a 20-point questionnaire to determine if someone is a W-2 employee or someone's a 1099 contractor, which I always find is the best place to start when having this conversation. it's there are so many business owners that spend a lot of money to try to get their team all under their own vision, to be able to give the customer support that they're looking to give all their customers, or to create the quality of work that you ultimately have. Well, that takes instruction, that takes training. So I did actually put together, I have that list. And so I can go through a couple of them. Do you have the right to give the worker instructions about when, where, and how to work? This would be a W-2 employee. Training. Do you train the worker to do the job in a particular way? Independent contractors should already know what they're doing, so they don't need any training. Integration. Are the workers' services so important to your business that they become a necessary part of your business? And that's one of the big rewordings of the Fair Labor Standards Act that had come out earlier this year about 1099s and W-2s. Work hours. Do you set the workers' hours for people, or do they tell you when they can work? How much of your business is dependent on the job that they have and that they do? All of these are, and there's 20, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But that gives you a general idea of what the IRS is looking for when it comes to classifying the people that you hire. But in general, W-2 employees, they're looking for stability. They're looking for a company that gives them a certain amount of pay that they can be dependent on. A lot of times, employers will hire W-2s and offer benefits, whether it's medical benefits, retirement options, paid time off, things that contractors aren't able to get. And then with the white gig economy, and this is strange because I never actually really looked into it. But the white
collar, well, because it's a new phenomenon, right? It's like after the pandemic with the great resignation and then also the great layoffs, right? Because it's been, double whammy.
Yes.
You have a lot of highly skilled executives, right? That are white collar executives, like, in across all industries, really, that are now being tapped into. Like, I know so many people that have gotten laid off or let go and then re-engaged by the same company, but as a consultant.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And so then that's happening every single day. And so then how do you navigate that? And if that's going to be the trend, do people align with whatever the IRS and OSHA and all those people, right, establish? Or does it ever happen the other way around, right? Where the system needs to adjust with what's just happening in the workplace? I mean, how does this work?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of the compliance laws that came out, like the Fair Labor Standards Act, workers' compensation, unemployment, all of these came out to help the general worker. When you have gig contractors, all of a sudden they can give you a price of what they're going to have for the project, but then they don't get a lot of the coverage that they would get. So if by chance they get hurt on a job, I know we're talking about white collar, but if they get hurt on the job, they've got no one to assist them in the medical bills except for themselves. Which they can get their own workers' comp. It costs a little bit more for an individual because, and we live in Florida. We know with homeowners insurance, every carrier is looking at, is this really going to be enough to wet my taste buds? But it also, we live in a society where we're getting older. And if we don't have things in place for retirement, then we're just going to be working every day till the day we die.
Right.
And so it's about creating that That's
Stability in a way.
stability.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I could totally see that. The thing is, it's almost like the market, the employers, kind of control that, right? What do you see, Chris? Because you're out in Boston.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much I mean, working in like the agency world, we have a mix. Obviously, W-2 employees. We do have different 1099 employees, very skilled labor, so kind of white collar
Mhm.
gig people come in from time to time, and I mean, think from the agency standpoint, it's really based off of workload. Like when we are absolutely slammed and cannot handle it, but it's a maybe a temporary project, or you know the client relationship hasn't been solidified yet. It's still the dating period, so you don't know if
Mhm.
you're going to need somebody full time. But a lot of times it works out where that client does become a full time client and signs on, and then that freelancer or consultant is hired on full time. But
Mm-hmm.
then I will say that there's also certainly situations where that freelancer or consultant does not want to go full time and
Mhm.
continues to do it as a 1099 on their own accord, just
Mm-hmm.
because it affords them the ability to kind of dictate their schedule, their pay as well. They
And
can demand more, but also the cons of that is the health benefits and things like that would not be covered if certain things happen. So it's yeah, I mean, I've kind of seen it from all angles, and it is interesting. And I think it's especially prevalent in like the agency world, but as a small business owner as well, and having started my own small production company, was when I was living in Florida. Most of my stuff was 1099 of people I brought on. It was just a project by project basis, because I hadn't scaled to a point where I could sustain a full time employee. And again, that came with its own pros and cons as well. I was able to be flexible as a business, but at the same time, I was not able to rely on that person, as a full time employee to
Mhm.
help me out in other areas. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the problem. I definitely understand bringing on 1099 contractors for certain projects.
Mhm.
However, if something were to happen, employee retaliation is actually a very, very real thing. If you have them as a 1099 and then you let them go, or they decide to leave and put in an unemployment claim and put you in as an employer, then all of a sudden there's going to be eyes on you on whether or not they were actually a W 2 employee or a 1099. And misclassification, if you get caught under the IRS, you could be in charge of all of their back taxes for as long as they were working for you. So I mean, there are some healthy risks to look at, but knowing that these are risks when it comes down to it, and determining whether or not it makes sense or not.
Yeah. I think that one of the things too is as you're scaling, and I'm just going to speak for myself, you add on freelancers or subs, right? To build bandwidth, again, depending on the project. And so I just feel that I agree with you, Chris, until you don't feel like, okay, I'm at a level that I can then transition
Right.
these people, right? If they want to, because that's the other thing too. You can
Right.
offer up the gazoo, right? And they don't want to, then they don't want to, right? Because maybe they just don't want to, work for stupid people too, right? I'm like, hey,
Although it's tough when your stupid boss is the one you're looking at in the mirror. You
exactly,
realize.
right? And so
Hated my boss when I was self-employed.
and so, so then it's like that fine balance. You can't make people, right, do the
Yep.
things, that you want them to do all the time. You can kind of like persuade them, But I once asked someone that is self-proclaimed as a serial entrepreneur, and that, developed businesses and then sold them, very successful woman. I told her, I asked her and I said, hey, what is that threshold, right? Because I have this doubt, right? Because we've been growing poco a poco. We're not, quite like, we're not big by any means, right? But we have a pretty solid team of freelancers and 1099s that come and go depending on the project. And so I've always had that vision of bringing, of really starting to. So right now we have 2 people on W-2, but the rest are 1099s that again come and go. It's like the accordion, right? It's like you
Mm-hmm.
it and then you contract it, right? And to me, since we're not at that place where we can just onboard all of these, as many people as we really would need on a day to day, because we have to be mindful, right, of how much comes in, and
Mm-hmm.
we all of our proposals that we put out are like that, right? That it's what do you need, and we're going to get the resources to meet those deliverables, and then once the project is closed, then okay, ciao, bye, right? So then it's done, right, on all ends. But I asked this woman, what is that threshold that you knew that it was time to convert? And she told me that normally for small business the, of a handful of people or freelancers, it's when you're at that more or less 500,000 mark, right, of net revenue, right? So after everything's paid, whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that's what I've kind of tried to use as a barometer, right? To figure out how many people, to then bring in as W-2s, or when is the right timing, to get them on board. I had someone that we were working on for years, right? On and off on projects. And in year 6, she tells me, and I was really leaning in on her, right? I was leaning in on her a lot. I love her. We're working again because I begged her to come back and give me a few hours a week, right? So I'm like, dude, right? She left and it was like losing a freaking arm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because she was regular and she just wanted to start her own business. Right. And how awesome. Right. And this is Dr. Shalonda Simmons Emanuel,
Yep.
who's my sister and I adore. And so then after a year and a half of working on a couple of projects that she even landed, right. And she would call me, hey, I've got this gig, right. And I've got this project. And I'm like, let's do it. And we worked on several projects together. Last year, I called her up and I'm like, dude, I need you. I get something. Right. And so now she's like, okay, I could give you this many hours a week, right? And she's like a fractional COO, but she doesn't want to work, you know, with me like on a regular like that or full time. And so, but I need her and I want her, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm good with having her as a fractional COO because I trust her. She's brilliant, right? She's reasonable also, right? Because she's like my sister, so I got the hookup, you know. And so I don't want to change that, like, and I don't think she wants to change that too. So what do you do in those cases?
Well, there's going to be some type of understanding, and that's one of the things that you have mentioned. That, well, one, you begged her, but then there had to be terms
Mm-hmm.
that both parties needed to agree on. Um, I'm guessing you weren't looking to hire on at $15 an hour, though. If you
No,
look at majority of the business owners that are just starting off, they don't have the funds to be able to work at market prices. And
right?
with 1099 contractors, yes, you don't have to pay the taxes on them, but then they have the right to go much higher
They
in their
do,
wage.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, you have employees, you bring on an employee, you pay them, $15.10. And if they find something that, makes $15.20, they're out the door. So it's
Right.
it's really trying to look at that balance, and really seeing, what's going to make sense for your business. I know that when I started my business, I was really into the technical thing and had no idea about sales. But I was gun ho. I was going to do it all on my own. Once again, I hated my boss. I was under paid and no paid time off.
Right.
But these are important things to at least consider when you have your business and you're looking to scale and you're looking to get to that point of being able to have a business worth selling so that you have a retirement there. Because if you're a solopreneur and you're trying to sell a business, you're sell your business, you've got nothing. You've got nothing to offer.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
from
I
your
never thought of
experience,
it.
are there like, I guess, what would you say are the best practices or the benchmarks for when is the right time? Sammy, you said you had a friend tell you 500,000 is, or net is around the right time. Is there a right scenario or like a case study from your experience of kind of how to do it the right way, and maybe even one of how to do it the wrong way, unfortunately?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I really don't know.
Mm,
I don't know if there is like a right time or a wrong time. I can tell you that the Small Business Association says that between 36% to 56% of small businesses deal with some type of litigation every year,
Oh,
and
wow.
that on average 90% of all small businesses, and that's anyone under 50 employees,
Mhm.
will are likely to see some type of lawsuit. So it's just looking at how. So, Chris, you lived in Florida, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, kind of like flood insurance in Florida. I don't necessarily live in a flood zone. Do I hold off from getting flood insurance knowing that at some point it
Right.
might happen? Long-term disability for anyone who's taking care of an elder parent. Do I hold off knowing that at some point it may be needed and then when it's really, really costly, or do I take care of it now? If you're willing to jump off that ledge and start a business, then you need to make sure that the protection of this new baby of yours it's right up there on priorities. So whether you have, one employee and a couple of 1099s or two employees, I mean, if you do payroll in general, you have to pay taxes anyhow.
Right.
If you can't find the paperwork or QuickBooks, you miss, put in something wrong and you paid too much, good luck with the IRS and ever getting it back. But if you are 1 cent little too low, you will hear about it. So it's about taking care of your business and protecting yourself. So whether it's an employee handbook, which has policies and procedures of your vision, how you want, people to work for you, that's enough to save your business. Working on compliance, I do a lot with compliance, but it's those policies and procedures, knowing the laws that are out there, and they're different whether you have two employees or over 50, and they're constantly changing, which I'm willing to offer that document to.
No,
I
that's
think
great.
this really helps, just as like at least for me, a misconception that bringing somebody on for HR to consult somebody in HR starting a business is like 20 steps down the line, of what I'm thinking about when I first started my business. And it's interesting, that it probably should be one of the very first things that you think of. So I guess I'm assuming you run into a lot of issues where, people are calling you probably more often than not when it's already too late. But I guess, yeah, when you are starting out, you kind of mentioned, the employee handbook and things like that. What do you help people or businesses off the bat to for our audience to know, like how do you set them up for to on the right path to success from an HR standpoint, and to avoid litigation issues?
Well, I'm a broker of services. I am not one that believes that everyone fits into a specific box.
Yep.
So it's based off of the needs. If a small company like a mom and pop company is looking to have, one or two employees and then stay that size, they don't need the bells and the whistles that are all out there. So by going through a very extensive needs analysis, I find out what their actual needs are. And then we have over 50 different vendors that we work for so that I can find exactly what they need. And so I'll get proposals from 3 or 4 different locations. I'm an Excel freak. So I put together an Excel comparison of services and costs. So it's very clear. It's not lengthy or wordy. And then from there, you have the information in front of you so you can make an informed decision. And then Merritt Business Solutions, we stay with all of our clients. So we help with knowing when things need to get in, what documents need to get in, whether or not you're growing or you needed to downsize and where your needs are, and be able to change and pivot. I'm a firm believer. I'm queen of Plan Z. Plan A and B never seem to work out. But if I'm able to pivot, then things seem to be okay. And I try to help with all of my business owners in that form.
So in this case that you share, for example, a small mom and pop shop that they want to hire maybe 2-3 people and keep it that way, right? They're not going to grow. It's a set space. It's a bodega. I don't know, right? They're not going to expand or franchise or anything. So what are some of the foundational assets or HR practices that they should be putting into place? So for example, you already said the onboarding handbook, right? To know exactly what the processes and what the expectations are. Maybe, I don't know, job description. What
That's
about
key.
workers comp? I mean, so what are we missing anything? Like, what would you say are like the top 5 things that we don't know because we just don't know, right? And that what Chris was mentioning before, you walk into this and you kind of know you need an accountant, right? You kind of know you need, right, that you need a marketing or someone to help you sell, right, and do the marketing. You kind of know that you need a lawyer to set up the LLC or the Inc. or whatever, right? But so from a human resources standpoint, what would you say are those top 3-5 things that are kind of basic assets or processes that should be put into place?
Well, federal law says that if you have over 3 employees, you need workers' comp, whether it's in office or it's not. So it's about looking at the rates and really selling your business. Making sure that your employee handbook has disciplinary policies and termination policies, and making sure that you stay consistent with all of your employees. Making sure that you have EPLI, which is Employer Practices Liabilities Insurance. That helps have with a retainer for an employment lawyer if you happen to get a claim for overtime wasn't paid correctly, or their hours weren't added in correctly, or they were some type of Fair Labor Standards Act claim. Top 5, let's see. It's important to know what you can and cannot do, what your expertise are. I can't tell you how many business owners I know that don't actually have an accountant. Or they do, but they only use it for tax time. Otherwise, they're doing it all on their own. They're doing it in their trucks because they work in construction, and that's the only place that's where their office is. They're doing it late at night. They're doing it on weekends, and they're really not quite sure what they're doing. It's important to know benefits and 401k options if you're having a difficult time actually retaining your employees. typically it will cost a company over $4,000 to just hire a new employee. But if you're putting in all that time of, building a job description, looking for the, or weeding through like 100 resumes, figuring out 3, calling background checks, doing actual interviewing, hiring someone, and then they don't show up. You don't get that time back. You don't get that money back. And it's just, it becomes like an ongoing process. You know what? There's just,
that's a
I'm
lot.
sorry, go ahead.
Right.
I mean, that's a lot. I'm like, note, taking notes, And also, since you mentioned job descriptions and onboarding and all of that, a lot of people talk a really good game. And we knew that, and we know this, right, during the interview process.
Yes.
And so what recourse does small business have, right? For someone that, again, talks a good game or whatever, and then they don't deliver the goods, because that's happened to me a couple of times. And then I'm like scrambling to find, a reply. That's why I stick with my people. That's why I stick with the freelancers and the, the subs that I have, because it's like, don't deviate or don't explore other, territories, because no bueno. But in any event, and then new generations, right? Like the new, it's like a different dynamic too when you're interviewing younger people nowadays. I think that their expectations are different. So talk to us a little bit about that, about the interviewing process, some of the things that we can avoid or red flags. I don't know, right? I mean, I really want to hear from you.
Wow. Do we have another hour?
I
Because
know,
that
right?
might take some time.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would, a tip that I would give any type of employer looking for a new hire is really truly having your vision and your mission statement for your business solid. Because at that point, if you're able to get someone on board and as excited about your mission for your business, then you will find someone that will stick with you. They want to see the business succeed. We need to really start working with our W-2 employees as entrepreneurs all in their own, by allowing them to have the autonomy and be able to think outside the box, be able to speak their mind. That's what this younger generation's bringing up. There's oh my goodness, my brain's kind of going in 100 different directions because I can go into so much. You definitely don't want to ask about questions of age, or race, ethnicity. You don't want to ask any type of discrimination questions. I do have a couple of concepts or questions that you really don't want to ask, like, are you biracial? Which church do you attend? What languages do you speak at home? Questions about age. Oh my goodness. There is a age discrimination. It's ADEA, an employment law. It's a law that came out that helps protect people over the age of 40. And I cry sometimes because I'm there. But there are so many of us that if we were to need to look for a brand new job, we might have some problems because we're up against these newer generations.
Right. Exactly.
So it's really about finding those that can get on board with your mission. So having that mission is going to be key.
Yeah. That's really, important. And yes, it's interesting that there are laws now protecting people over 40, because I do also know several people that have been looking, right? And they're my age group, and it's been very, very difficult, right? And of course, I've proposed entrepreneurship because like, hey, well, while you keep on looking, again, the white gig,
Lucky.
the white collar gig economy is a thing. And so
Hmm.
there's value in that too. But this has been really, really enlightening for me because I work with a lot of subs and freelancers, right? And in all age groups too. And so it's very interesting to learn about what their expectations are. And yeah, that helps a lot because I'm looking to scale. And so anyway, this was that was very, very enlightening. Very enlightening. So thank you so much, Mandi, for joining us today. Do you have any closing takeaways or anything that you want to advise on?
Oh, definitely. I do give free needs analysis. I'm very consultative, and I'm willing to kind of break down numbers for people. Um, there are a couple of people that I want to speak to directly. Solopreneurs that hire 1099s that have interest in turning a business into something they can sell for the retirement. They should sit down with me. If there's an owner who has promoted someone to play HR simply because they've been there the longest, they should schedule some time with me. If there is an owner or an HR professional that doesn't have time to investigate workers' comp claims, unemployment claims, compensation planning, sexual harassment claims, discrimination claims, unlawful termination claims, or any type of Fair Labor Standard Act changes, now's the time to schedule some time with me. So
Great.
that is my takeaway.
Well, thank you very much. I think, again, just to echo, Samí, thank you for coming on. This has been enlightening for me. I am both a W-2 employee and run my own business. And again, I probably have been was lucky as a business owner when I was in Florida, just with 1099s and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very serious thing. You mentioned your $35,000 fine when you started out, and my sent chills down my spine just thinking about that as a business owner. So yeah, I mean, it's a very important thing, and also just as you mentioned, the economy is changing, jobs are changing, people are changing in the way that society works, and to have somebody who is on top of those changes and to navigate that is invaluable as a business owner. So hopefully our audience enjoyed this, and again, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. I think that this is a great podcast of just allowing people to share with other business owners, other just people in general, and I think that it's amazing. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. Thank you for tuning in, and tell your friends to find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to show up and speak up.